Okay, so we're all set on that. We have a number of things. We've got 3 or 4 warrant articles that I was able to do some follow-up on. I don't know if Jeremy was able to call you today, Rich. I talked to Chris and he said that Jeremy had a
This
tremendous,
conference will now be recorded.
that there was a tremendous amount of work that he had to do and that he was hoping to be able to get to you today. I don't know, was he able to call you?
I did not hear from him, John.
Okay, I said that if that couldn't happen, then would you try to get him, would he try to get Jeremy to call you tomorrow? And
That's
so
fine.
that's where it stands. I'll tell you what I found, and I also, and as a soft email, I asked him to talk to you about both the vehicles, the transit vehicle and the mower. I found out about the article that includes the storage. what they've got to do is they've got to do some construction down in the basement of the library as well as some in the pavilion. So I don't know whether evaluation means to evaluate the project. I kind of doubt that since it seems to be set in everybody's, but it may be to evaluate what it is need to do from a construction point of view. I don't know that for certain. That's just my guess.
So we got 14 grand on top of the other 14 grand. So it's going to cost us at least 28 grand to get that workspace going. And we
Right.
still probably need to buy some tools and shelving and some other stuff inside. Maybe you can get it all done for that, but it's not a $14,000 item. It's closer to pretty.
Yeah, it's being done in just 2 warrant articles instead of 3. And that's what makes me think that they're actually thinking about construction, because one of the articles is actually to do electrical work.
Yeah, and then there's no question they need that because that was mentioned in the memo we got.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I mean, it started out as just a roof with no walls as a building, right?
Correct.
There are walls there
It was a
now.
pavilion.
Right.
Yeah, the walls are there now, but it was a pavilion, Scott.
Or it
Right.
was-
So it wasn't built as a building with electrical built into it, probably.
Probably had enough to
Well,
warm.
certainly not enough electrical for a workshop.
That they have to add in now because it wasn't part of the original construction.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, I remember picnic tables under the pavilion.
Yeah,
Yeah, and if you're running a workshop, you need 220. You can't just have 110. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's going to be costs associated with that. I hate this. I hate this article. I mean, you know my opinion. I mean, we're kicking the can down the road, and
Yeah,
we have a separate department anyways. Who the hell knows? Because people can't play nice in the sandbox. All right, whatever.
so
I
So,
was
Chris-
astonished at the reason.
Chris and the select board have put this forward, so they must approve it. Is that correct?
Yes, they vote next Monday at a meeting next Monday on it. They had a discussion. Or actually, it was described to me as a first reading of the warrant articles last night. But I don't know how much, Bob, you maybe heard part of it. Did they have discussions on any of the articles, or were they in fact just read to them?
There were about 2 questions on the whole thing.
Yeah, that's what I probably thought.
It certainly was not an in-depth discussion of anything.
Yeah,
And it was so garbled that you couldn't, I mean, there were echoes all over. Apparently, when they have these meetings, 3 of them are sitting down in the COA building. And every mic picks up the echoes from the other one. So the sound comes over to each person and bingo.
the town hall.
Over the
Town
place.
hall been described to me as the absolute worst spot in the entire town for internet and cable reception. That the amount of cable that they've paid for to go into there is minimal. Whereas it's something like at the 12 level, whereas at the high school, at the East Middle School, they spent money to bring it in at a 500 level. But they're still using that for these webcam meetings. So the person who told me this wasn't surprised at the quality that comes across. They're not paying for anything more.
I gotta say, it sort of roils me that we've got to put out 30 grand because of a personnel issue that no one's willing to tackle and try to solve.
Well,
I agree, Bob.
Yeah, I don't know if the personnel issue is the whole story. But from what I heard, the personnel issue is a real one, and is not going to be solved real easily. But that could be there could be other things too. I mean, we've always been able to go at these warrant articles and budget items by going down a certain depth and then perhaps one more level. We've gone down about 4 levels. I don't think we've uncovered everything yet, but we certainly have the option to say that we don't approve of this, and we would then say that at the town meeting. For the other articles on the equipment, our options will be to approve them as written, disapprove them, or disapprove them and state that we intend to make an amendment to the article at the town meeting, which I think is sort of the way we were kind of heading, if we were going to think about them at all.
My opinion is, and then I'll let it go, is I know that if they're brought to a vote now, I wouldn't approve any of them because I see them as all connected to a
Right.
bigger problem. It's a personnel issue, you know, and there might be layers below that, John. We've gone as deep as we need to go, but it sounds to me if the Board of Selectmen then approves these things, that they're just kicking the can. They don't want to deal with the personnel issue either. And all we've done is create a whole other cost structure in this town that we're going to continually fund year after year with new equipment and new requests, and that we literally just don't have the money for.
Well, as I said, the vehicle portion of it, I separate out from the location. I don't know. I don't really know that we're duplicating vehicles. Highway department does not have a mower. Public service department doesn't need one as big as before, but they need one. All right. Well, let's. I would take a motion on. I would take a motion on the article about the $14,000 for the storage containers. Do I have a motion? Do I have a motion to approve the article?
Doesn't sound like there is.
Okay, do I have a motion? Do I have a motion to not approve the article? For article. What we have. So I have a motion to not approve what we have as Article 14. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, then all in favor of voting to disapprove Article 14, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Okay, the motion passes. All right, now let's move on to the, well, actually, I think we need to wait until Jeremy gets in touch with Rich. And they have a discussion about the possibility of used vehicles for the transit vehicle and the mower. Is that you're all understanding?
Yes.
Okay.
Josh,
Bob?
just to bring you up to speed, you know, on the mower, because I know you brought it up in our last meeting when we were together, is it's a 16-foot Toro 5900D wings type mower used to cut the grass. When I did some research last night while we were in the meeting, you know, you can buy one 3 years old with 1,000 hours on it for, you know, $30,000 to $50,000. Where a new one is $115,000. It was my opinion that, you know, if we were going to spend the money, considering the times we're in, you know, a used mower with a warranty with minimal hours on it would be far better money spent than, you know, spending $115,000 on a new one.
You missed a very interesting meeting last night while we were discussing the lawnmower. We have no idea what it is that they researched or how they go about made a decision to purchase the one that they have. We found out more information about it, but not any reasons why they decided to get this one as opposed to alternatives. But in the course of the conversation, Rich, just sitting at home with his phone, was able to Google and find used equipment that seemed to be very suitable and much less expensive. So we have our questions. That's
Yeah, I
why,
mean, it certainly sounds like an appropriate question and something to research before we vote on it.
yeah. So that's why we have this request in for Jeremy to call Rich and discuss this with him.
And
Okay,
same regards to the vehicle, Scott, you know, there's,
the van,
we'd like, yeah, the van, we'd like more specifics about what the van is, because we've heard a 450 series, which is 1.5 tons, or a 350 series, which is a 1 ton. You know, there's a lot of questions about what the van actually is and why it's $50,000. So is that includes being outfitted with racks and things like that in it? So we need more information there to have a better understanding of what we're actually approving there.
whether the value is there for the dollar.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement with that.
Good. Okay, I think,
And I've got a question for you.
Yep.
Do you know what a consent agenda is?
no, but I look back on what the wording was in a couple past years at town meeting, and it's always the same. The first article is to see if the town will vote to approve the consent agenda as follows. So in past years, there have been more articles under that, or they've been listed as separately as they were in the draft that we were first given. But I see in the new draft that Chris has that virtually the whole collection of those things and the stuff we do year after year after year are all listed as sub-articles under Article 1A. But I was surprised to see the word consent, so I went back and it's been used in the past. Apparently that's the language that you use. I don't know where it comes from.
I don't know.
I'm looking at a Google of it. It says allows the board to approve all these items together without discussion.
Yeah, that's what I thought you might come up with.
Yeah, you know, hey, that rings true to a conversation I had earlier today. They're going to try to make this town meeting like uber fast on that Saturday.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
Without a lot of discussion, so that would make sense with a consent article like that. Just everything here, you know, one vote approves it all.
Yeah, I remember a number of years ago when John Lalonde was the town moderator. After going through year after year of reading all of the separate budget items and essentially having no questions about any of them, or maybe one or two out of the however many 30 some odd we do, he suggested that we basically do it like this, that we read a whole bunch of the budget items and then vote basically for as much of the budget as possible with one vote. And Lynn has adopted that as reading 3 or 4 articles at the same time, but then pausing for questions about them. So I see it, but I'm going to have to tell Lynn that these things are not consent articles. That we're going to have a different opinion on at least 3 of them.
You know, that's the reason I asked the question, because the article for the 14 grand is Article 1M,
Right.
which would mean it's part of a big group.
Yeah, that's what I think. They have all this whole bunch of stuff now categorized as just Article 1 with sub pieces.
So the question is, what happens if you want to have one of them voted separately?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get.
If we're going to make a recommendation on one article that's negative, and there's 18 articles that are all positive, the town doesn't want to turn all 18 down. So it might be something favoring a yes vote on the article rather than it being open to discussion.
Or is there a way to do like what we do? We agree with all of them except and vote them separately.
And what we might have to do is show up with a written amendment that is basically all of these things with just a few of them changed. Because, yeah, but certainly you have to be able to amend any article. So even if all of this is just one article, you have to be able to amend it. But the problem is that the town moderator and the clerk and law requires that the amendment be in writing.
Well, that's certainly not going to make the meeting fast if we have to do that.
Yes, and I'm gonna bring that up to Chris and to Lynn and see if they can straighten this out ahead of time.
That
Because
sounds good.
you know, if we do this, then perhaps, you know, we have to read the whole doggone thing from beginning to end. So anyway, that's what I know, and I think that you're probably correct that this is just supposed to be one vote to take care of all these.
There's another simple solution to it. And that's to make item 1M be some other number, because they haven't signed the warrant yet. So obviously they could pull anyone off of that, out of that group, and have it stand as a separate article.
Yeah, and I could, that's basically what I was thinking about doing is that the only one of those things that's in here? The rest of the stuff is in a separate article, right?
Well, the chapter 90 money is in there. That's also one of it's in that batch.
Well, we don't have a problem with that one, do we?
No, not in general, no.
No. I mean, that's just,
But-
that's just to accept the amount that the state has said they're gonna give us, or we assume the state is gonna say they're gonna give us.
Well, yeah, but it's also an appropriation, so that. And we got the offset receipts for the fire warden. But that's small sums of money. Oh, we got the Pathfinder budget in there also. I mean, I guess the issue is that financial articles shouldn't be part of a consent agenda.
Is that by what kind of precedent says that?
Me,
Operationally, it's not good for us.
yeah, I mean, if we're supposed to comment on every article and our comment doesn't really have much bearing if it's one of 20 articles or 20 votes, really, that are occurring.
Sounds like we're being ramrodded.
Something like that, yeah.
Well, yes, but only in the sense that we are supposed to make recommendations to the town on all articles that purport to require appropriations. And none of these things are technically considered to be the budget. Under the way that-
It's an appropriation of money, so we have to comment on it. So the people ought to be given the opportunity to listen to us and make up their mind based upon what we say, not based upon the fact that we got 14 revolving funds that are boilerplate from year to year.
Another question I have is that if these are all one, are they all in fact going to be funded from the same source? Now, take for example the Chapter 90 money. The amount is going to be authorized under Chapter 291 of the Acts of 2004, and construction improvements defined under Chapter 90. But the broad article just says will transfer from available funds. It's not going to be the same available funds as the other things are coming from. And as a matter of fact, are they all coming from available funds, or do they all? Some of them.
No, because we got the OPEB in there also.
Yeah, funding source is different for these things.
Yeah, but I suppose each article could have the funding source. specified within it when it's actually read.
If anybody had any suggestions for a different funding source for one of these things, then the same thing would apply. They'd have to have a written motion for this entire mass of things. This
No,
is, I
We
mean,
don't know that for 100% sure. We think that.
well, if it's one article, yeah,
All of a sudden, they may find a way to take that one article out of the big batch. So that you only have to amend that one subsection.
yeah, I would hope so. That's the kind of thing I'm gonna have to ask Chris and
Yeah.
Lynn. Because that'll make it, that would really change this into a railroading operation.
Yep.
And I guess we could say we're sure they're not intending to be a railroading operation. They're just trying to be efficient at the meeting. But it's the results are indistinguishable from a railroading operation. Okay. Anything else on the warrant articles? Oh, Bob, I had one thought about, it's one of the last ones where we authorize using $1 million in stabilization funds to reduce the tax levy.
I mean, free cash.
And free cash to reduce the tax levy. That would be, that's kind of a generic article. And it relies on the current presentation of the budget, current proposal for the budget, needing that much money or planning to use that much money from stabilization funds instead of trying to raise taxes. But as a matter of fact, depending upon what happens to the budget on the floor, that number could change. So I don't know if it makes sense for us to approve a specific amount in that warrant article, as opposed to approve the general idea of using an amount of free cash to balance the budget without having to increase the tax base. Does that make any sense?
Yes and
It
no.
does.
From a practical point of view, it does, but the book we publish has in it the funding sources. So that number would show up as a funding source in the book that we publish. So
Yes.
then things would be out, if you, sooner or later, either you're not going to show how the budget is balanced, or you're going to have to change it along the way. And I'm not sure which is a better way to go. As I think at this point in time, however, well, we know that we have voted against $14,000. That's the only, but on the other hand, that's only a recommendation. That's not something that we determined.
Right. Everything on the warrant article, except for the figures on the budget, or we just make a recommendation to the town.
Yeah. So,
And, we try to do it ahead of time to the select board too, so we can work out some of these questions. But it's
so I,
whatever we recommend is not what gets printed. What gets printed is what the select board wants printed on the warrant articles.
with the exception, obviously, of the article that's the budget itself.
Right.
But if you use it that we want to do it the way everything is presented to the town, I guess it's, even if we're against something, we got to assume that it might be voted and we use the figure that's here.
You know, an option at the town meeting, and probably it would be put in by whoever it is going to be reading this article, would be to put in the actual figure. And I can't see that we would be opposed to that. And
No,
yet,
as a practical matter, if you just go through the mechanics, the two vehicles or the vehicle and the mower are both being borrowed, so that would have no effect on the free cash. So it's only the $14,000 for the storage containers that can possibly affect the amount of free cash being used. On the other hand, we probably would want to use all the free cash regardless and make an adjustment in setting the tax rate in local receipts. In other words, reduce the use of local receipts by 14,000 because we wouldn't want to have the free cash disappear as of whatever the day is after we have our town meeting.
I would amend what you said in just this way, that right now, based upon what we're talking about, that would be the only adjustment. But
Yes,
can't say that that is what the only adjustment would be. Somebody could amend and amend successfully any one of these articles, which would result in either fewer dollars or less dollars required. But then the choice is, as you say, is to decide whether or not to still allocate this amount of money from free cash, which is what I think probably would happen, or else to make an adjustment based upon the adjustment in all the articles. So.
yeah, but I would come out on the side of leaving the free cash, use up all the free cash with the vote and deal with it later on, setting the tax rate, however the best way seems to be at that point in time. And besides, there might be something else come up along the way.
Well,
We have
then,
another meeting, there might be some other brand new appropriation anyways.
yeah. We still have the possibility that some kind of budget might be done sometime between the 15th of July and the 25th of July, which would then change virtually everything that's in here. But the question is that are we better off to be in a position where we approve a warrant article for this specific dollar amount of money and then be prepared to offer an amendment at the town meeting if some other amount is offered? Or are we better off to approve a generic version of this and just say that we're only approving a generic version of this, that the amount of there might change significantly at the based upon what happens in the town meeting? I don't like being in the position to say, well, we voted this amount of money and we would recommend to the town this amount of money, but which we basically would say at the beginning of the meeting. At least we've always in the past have said we are, to make things go faster, we always say we are in support of all of the warrant articles except for a couple, and we'll talk about those as they come up. But if we say that in the beginning and then it changes, then what are we going to do? Are we in fact going to say, no, we want to amend it back to the original? Or if it goes up, we can say, no, we want to amend it back to the original. It's just, if that could be, if there's an easy way to avoid that, I would just like to avoid it.
Well,
So,
my thought is that what we want to do is to, regardless of what it's used for, is to spend or appropriate the full amount of the free cash. In other words, as an example, I mentioned that if something is reduced along the way, obviously if it's increased, there's nothing we can do about it. And the number isn't sufficient to balance the budget. There's a gap in there. But if we use if we appropriate the full amount of the free cash, then when we get to the tax recap, setting the tax rate, assuming no other appropriations or anything of that nature, the draw that's needed on local receipts could be $14,000 less, or nobody would ever really notice it. We could tax $14,000 less.
let me, I understand where you're coming from, but let me let me tell you, I'm coming from the exact opposite side in that I'm not thinking about needing more money. I'm thinking about needing less money. What if between July 15th and July 25th, the legislature comes out and they approve that there's going to be no reduction in Chapter 70 money. Then all of a sudden, and that they're going to continue it. And they find out that instead of the 20% cut that they've been saying they need, they're going to be able to do it with an 18% or 17% cut. Then we're not going to need all of the stabilization. We're not going to need all the free cash in order to subsidize the budget. We won't need that much to subsidize the school budget, for example. Then by the time the end of the meeting comes around, what we would like to do is to have another article, and this could be the difference between a first town meeting and a second town meeting, that puts whatever money that we use to subsidize the budget into a stabilization fund. And I've asked Chris and Lynn if the town has adopted the Mass General Law, or if we've been required to adopt the Mass General Law that was passed a couple of years ago that changed the provisions for putting money into stabilization funds. It used to be that it required a 2/3 vote to put it in or a 2/3 vote to take it out. But the legislature passed an amendment to the law governing all that, that now only requires a 50% vote to put money in, but still requires a 2/3 vote money to put out. So it would in fact be easier to put in stabilization funds. And if we're in that situation where we don't need all the stabilization funds to do the budget, I would rather that we have the option to put it into a stabilization fund. I mean, all the free cash. I'd rather we have that option. And I'd rather not have been on record that we recommend that we use all of the free cash to reduce the budget, because then unless we say, oh, well, we didn't think of that, and that we recommend that you use it and that the town should have a lower tax rate next year as a result. Maybe I'm worrying about things.
I agree with you.
But that's the stuff
I
I worry.
agree in the concept. I don't know technically how you can bring it about. Because if you were to, let's say we didn't need $200,000 of the free cash.
Yeah.
We've only got one shot at appropriating it.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, because it disappears at the end of your fiscal year. So once under normal conditions, you wouldn't be able to vote it in July. So you've got an extension to vote it, but if you voted at your annual town meeting, if you don't vote at all, I believe that you're not going to have another shot at appropriating it. It's just going to roll over into next year sometime in February or whenever. So what would really be nice is if there was an article to transfer $1 or such other sums to one of the stabilization funds, then it wouldn't disappear.
Oh, that's okay. That's the idea, because I basically had the same thought that I don't know if it's possible at this date to try to get some kind of placeholder warrant article that would, in case of these circumstances, allow us to put money into the stabilization fund, or whether it's possible to introduce one entirely that isn't at least hinted at someplace on the warrant.
If it isn't on the warrant, I think you'd be hard pressed to try to change the wording. In other words, to say to appropriate the free cash of a certain amount of money to offset the expenses of the town, and if the people have been warned, or place it in a stabilization fund, that would be fine. I would think. I mean, town council ought to pass judgment on it. But if the only option is to appropriate it to offset taxes, I don't think you could amend that motion to come up with a different purpose. You could certainly amend it for a different amount, no question about that.
Right.
So maybe if we could get a placeholder in there, I mean, it's very, very unlikely there's going to be any budget come down in between the 15th and the date of our town meeting, but funny things happen.
Yeah, that's it. Now, if for example, nothing is done on the town budget before then, but we have a second town meeting, then in the second town meeting, which I assume would require its own set of warrants. Would that be correct? That'd probably be correct, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, at a second town meeting, you could write out the warrant articles to take away some of this free cash from reducing the tax rate and put it into a stabilization fund. And make that a warrant article for the second town meeting. That would be
Well,
okay.
let's do it a different way. Just draw the article and charge it up to the tax levy. In other words, because you reduce the taxes more than you needed, you reduce the need for taxes by more than you had to. So consequently, you've got some authority to spend money still left. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but what do you spend it on?
Well, you get to your next town meeting, and now you say, okay, we didn't $200,000 of tax revenue to balance the budget. So we can still tax the same amount of money, so we could appropriate that same $200,000 to a stabilization fund.
But that, either way, wouldn't that require a warrant article anyway?
Yeah, it still require a warrant article.
Okay, all right. So some way around the appropriate wording, a warrant article would be able to get us to recapture the money.
Yeah, if we overspend it, a warrant article could recapture it. If we appropriated more than we really needed to balance the budget, then we could have room to make another appropriation of that same amount of money to go to anything.
Okay, the other way is to have a warrant article. That's if things happen after the meeting. The other way is to have a warrant article that, say, puts $1 into stabilization funds.
Yeah, placeholder. at this
Yeah,
point.
and that
Yeah.
would be easy enough to explain to people why such a strange looking article is there. Okay, I've got enough to talk to them about.
Or we could change this article by $1 and then we
Yeah.
could really move the dollar.
I think I've got enough to talk to them about. Anybody else have any comments on this, or are you just happy to have the conversation end right there and get on to the rest of the business?
It was interesting to listen to.
Okay, let's move on. The other item, I sent draft 2 of our annual report around, and I hope everybody was able to get it, if not actually go through it. Did everybody, the email, I think, said annual report draft 2?
Yes, received.
Okay.
I have it.
Okay, and Bob, you got it too?
I got it.
Okay. I made a couple of changes in the stuff that I had written that we looked at in the first meeting. I'll tell you where those are. On the first page, in the second paragraph from the bottom, about halfway through, I added the words, on the other hand, the town has been told that the legislature, and then the last sentence I changed to additionally, there's a minimum amount specified in state statutes for school choice aid. And at the last,
John, or in my conversation earlier today, I was told that there would be no reading at the beginning.
that's okay. Yeah, that's okay.
We could have a handout, but there could be a handout, but there may not be allowed for a reading. But it wasn't definitive, but it sounded definitive, even though it wasn't definitive.
Yeah, gonna have to ask them to check the current bylaws and make sure that that they don't want us to talk at all, that's possible. But the important thing though is for this to be in part of the written record, I think.
Yeah.
The other thing at the bottom,
Just have in, John. I thought there used to be a warrant article that said to hear the report of all the town officers. And I do not see that.
No, there's nothing in there this year for that.
No, and that normally would be there, so
Let me see.
it could very well be the case.
Last year, I got the booklet here. Yeah, last year, Article 1 was to say the town will vote to conduct the business of the meeting as follows. And then it gives us the 2 dates for the 2 town meetings. And that's addressed at the first of the 2 town meetings. And also the second thing, which is addressed at the first 2 town meetings, was Article 2 said, see if the town will hear the reports of town officers and all standing and special committees and acts thereon. And we have always gotten up and said, we'd like to defer this until the next meeting, until the June meeting, and that's always been accepted. So those are missing entirely. They were done as part of the first of the 2 town meetings. I mean, I can't blame anybody for wanting to waive the stuff if there's nothing critical to be said.
Well, you'll have to take a cut and pay because you won't be having as much work to do.
On the other hand,
Oh, year-end bonus?
I really am not going to have to wear a coat and tie. Let me continue on. I changed some slight wording in the last sentence. I wrote now had it's impossible for all those parameters to hold true and still cut Granby's express state aid by 20%. At the top of the
Hey, John?
Yep.
That paragraph, as an FYI, additionally is spelled incorrectly.
Yes, I see that.
Just so I clearly, all right, we moved on.
Yeah, I must have missed that on the spell check. The I made a couple of minor. I made a minor change in the first paragraph. Now say that in the let's see. The second sentence, Granby's total budget as writing assumes a 20% reduction across all categories of state aid, itemized and disavowed governor's budget. And that Granby's budget includes more than $1 million in cuts to the aid for school. Just to clarify which budgets I was talking about. I did not yet remove the "it seems preposterous that here we are" sentence because I don't know yet. I don't know yet that I've made all the changes there. I want to get the point across, but that still is one of the possibilities. That last sentence. The rest of it, the next 1, 2, 3, 4, next 4 paragraphs are basically the same, except for the second paragraph of that page. Rich, I took what your reaction was when reading that paragraph first. And then we had the 9 C cuts at the very end. I moved it up to the very beginning, so it's clear right away what it is I'm talking about in that paragraph.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah. The next were the same. Then this new stuff that I've added starts. Well, actually, the 4th paragraph on this page. The 3rd paragraph I added the sentence that if the state says cuts have to be made, then Granby will probably also have to make cuts when and where for either government body. No idea yet. And then the paragraph about in a normal year, I think that's all the same. And I expanded a little bit about the cut in Granby's state aid. I put in after it's gone forever, I put in the sentence, it is being allocated to make up the projected deficit in state aid and local receipts, because those 2 things match up pretty closely. So I put that in as a way to think about it. The rest of it is
just a quickie, get rid of local receipts.
okay. It does more than make up for the state aid. Do we care about that? I mean, it's still correct that it's being allocated to make up the projected deficit in state aid, but we've got, I think, someplace in here, the document, either before or after this, that says we've had a 1.3 million cut in state aid, and we've got using 1.5 million of stabilization funds. So I wanted something there to cover that difference.
You know, I'm just talking about the word local receipts.
Right. If I leave that out, then the sentence, it's being allocated to make up the projected deficit in state aid. We'll have people asking, you're using $1.5 million of free cash, you only have a 1.3 million in reduction in state aid. So that's why I put that in there. So that there's something else to, you know, and that was an easy one because it was pretty close, and the amounts added pretty close. You don't have to go digging through all the different changes that were made to funding sources and things.
Well, the odd thing is that when we got all done, we reduced our the need from local receipts. That's what my concern was.
Yeah, but if you look at what the reduction was that was made in the local receipts, that is a funding source which has been reduced, and state aid has been a funding source has been reduced, and we don't need either of those funding sources at the same level as they were last year because we make up for it. But we do need to make up the amount that those two were reduced.
Yeah, all right. I won't belabor the point.
Okay. The new stuff is thereafter, and I said I wanted to get some ideas written down on paper. I don't think this should be organized as all one piece without some topic headings in between, but I was just trying to get through the writing. So if you want to go through it, we can go through it. If you read maybe the last two paragraphs on that second page, I would appreciate if you would think about whether they're okay, whether they can use some editing visions.
Where does it start, John? What's
As this writing, things are in such a state of flux that Granby's proposed budget could best be described as a best guess scenario. So that paragraph and the one
Okay.
after on page 2. Okay.
I can't come up with any suggestion for that paragraph.
No, read.
Okay. Another consequence that's very important to Granby residents.
Going back to the first one, the first paragraph, right now we're talking about, next to the last one.
Yep.
I'm not wild about the last sentence. I mean, every town that relies as heavily on state aid as Granby does, I think every town period relies heavily on the state aid. I don't think we're any different than anybody else, and this sort of implies that maybe we are.
Yeah, we're more of a basket case than everybody else.
No, I don't think, well, it implies that we're more of a basket case, but I don't think we are.
Right.
Well, I was just thinking that I'm pretty sure that our percentage of the school expenses that come from the state are a higher level than most of the cities and towns.
I would say that you're correct on that. Our chapter 70 for our size is greater than our size. It's obviously not as much per student as some of the districts that have lots of low-income people, because that sort of stuff, income level, gets figured into the chapter 70 distribution. But I think I would be perfectly happy if you just ended it. This is the identical situation faced by every town.
Okay, every town that relies heavily on state aid.
Pardon? And eliminate that, yes.
Just eliminate everything after that. How does
I mean,
that sound?
The
If
word
you-
town.
If
This
you
is-
end it there, it kind of implies us.
Yeah.
without planning, right?
So I'll end it, this is the identical situation faced by every town. And end it there?
Yeah, end it there.
Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. All right, last paragraph.
Yeah, I read it during the debate over the last one, and it read well to me, John.
Okay, Scott, Bob,
This is another consequence paragraph.
yes, another consequence.
Okay, the paragraph ended on that page. Yes, all right, that's fine.
Okay. Scott, have you had a chance to look at it?
I'm working it.
Okay.
Doesn't sound pretty, but it sounds like where we're at.
Yeah, that's the problem. Okay, the first paragraph on the last page.
Wrong with that one, John?
I'm sorry, say it again.
It seems like it says the schools may not be immune to the consequences if Chapter 78 is reduced for multiple years and
Yeah.
required net school spending is also reduced.
Yes. Yeah, right now, it looks as if the way that the law is written, or certainly the way it's always been interpreted, is that DESE, the Department of Education, takes what their formula is and adds to that what they expect Chapter 70 to be, and it's based upon the governor's budget, and put the two of them together to come up with a figure for what you got to spend on the schools. Now, in some past years, in fact, when Chapter 70 has gone down a little bit from what the governor's budget is, then the net school spending figure has gone down by that much. But usually what happens is that Chapter 78 goes up, and that they, in fact, raise the net school spending because Chapter 70 goes up and because their formula says it should. So I don't know what's going to happen, though, if there's a big cut in Chapter 78. This DESE has been a very, very strong proponent of maintaining funding for schools, and I don't know whether they would have a way to change what they've done in the past and keep net school spending high. I just don't know. So I put that in there because it's another one of these uncertainties. You know, normally it would say if Chapter 70 goes down, the net school spending is going to go down. But I don't know if you can claim that in these times. I just want to prepare people, though, for the possibility.
Yeah, and I think the way it reads, at least the way it hits at least when I read it, and is it's saying, hey, if Chapter 78 goes down and required net school spending goes down, why then would it be unlikely any reasonable way to continue subsidizing schools? Because if they both went down, if what was required to spend went down and the aid went down, it would seem like they went down in parity to one another. I think it's just how it reads to me, and maybe I'm not thinking about it properly, but.
I think one of the difficulties with it is if 78 is reduced for multiple years and net school spending is also reduced, there's unlikely to be any reasonable way to continue subsidizing the schools. If net school spending doesn't go down, there's unlikely to be any way the town can put together a budget. Because net school spending, if it goes down, then balancing the budget has the option of reducing the school budget. If net school spending doesn't go down, there is no choice on cutting the school budget. Whatever shortfall there is has to be made up entirely by the general government portion.
Yeah, that's where I'm getting hung up in the wording of it, John, is it's I don't know, it's just difficult a difficult paragraph, I guess, and it's not the topic. It's I don't even know how you word it better, John. So you might have done the best there is to do with it.
Okay, well, let me see if I got some of the ideas here. Maybe break it up into a couple of ideas. First of all, is that if Chapter 70 aid is reduced for multiple years, that will be a major blow to Granby's income. If net school spending is reduced, there is unlikely to be any reasonable way to continue subsidizing the schools. If net school spending is not reduced, that there is unlikely to be any reasonable way to continue the services of the rest of the town departments.
Yeah, something along that line, wordsmith some more, I think, John, feels right.
How does that sound to you, Bob, Scott?
That's getting better.
Yeah,
Okay.
separating them is a good idea, John.
Yeah, let me try that. Let me try that and see what I can come up with on this. So maybe separated to the ideas of net school spending, of Chapter 70 going down, net school spending being reduced, and net school spending not being reduced. Okay. Okay. What about the sentence, cutting public safety resources and raising property taxes seem quite unpalatable options?
I think that's kind of when you rephrase the other and you talk about picked up by the rest of the government, town government, and that, I think invariably you're saying that. So I don't know if that would be redundant at that point. So I guess I'd have to reread the first one, once you re-wordsmith that, and maybe keep that at the end, John, and we can figure out where to fit it in, if it needs to fit in.
Yeah, it certainly would be implied. For people who are not good at taking implications from what they're reading.
Yeah, some people you have to spell stuff out for. I get it.
Yeah, and it's enough of a jarring sentence there that it may get suggested people read it. So, but let me see how the rest of the word works out.
Perfect example of a rock and a hard place.
Right. Yeah. All budgets like that. Okay. Next paragraph. Best way to think about the proposed budget is this.
I liked that one. I thought it was good.
Is the analogy with the small business ring like it's ring correct?
That's what I liked about it was the analogy.
Okay.
When we get time for a PPP loan?
I'm good with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bob? Yeah. Okay. Then the we wanted to talk about. We're basically trying to get across the idea of not having figured out how to exactly phrase this, but that if we think we're in such big trouble, why are we spending the free cash? And so this is all part of the idea that free cash is very similar to stabilization funds. So I've got the next paragraph in there.
So going back to the comment about cutting public safety resources. So the more we raise that flag, the harder you got to sell the spend the savings now. I mean, they're working in opposite directions. Where are we trying to lead them?
Well, we're trying to lead them away from what we know is the only place to get a large sum of money. The police department is the only department in town that's got a big enough budget that could be cut to fill in the deficit from the schools if these very dire cuts in Chapter 78 are made. And I do not think that would be a good idea. And I don't think the town would think that would be a good idea. But everybody has to recognize, a lot of people recognize already that that's the other big source of funding, but we don't think that that's where the money should come from.
But if in fact we vote this budget the way it's being directed or led or pushed or whatever, then we're not maybe have the option to make that decision next year if push comes to shove.
Well, only if we get a complete cut in general government aid and all the school aid is kept intact, then we've got a big problem.
Wouldn't other towns be in that same boat?
Yeah, but that's other towns. We're just worrying about what happens to Granby here.
I guess my point would be, could the state do that to all the towns?
Well, I think from the state's point of view, they're not recommending or suggesting that anybody cut any particular budgets. They're just suggesting that they're going to give you less money. And what I would worry about would be that if the required net school spending goes down, that some people might think that would be appropriate to go after the funding that's now allocated to the police department and use that to make up the deficit. That's what I think would be the big brouhaha in town. And I would hate to see that happen, but I think that a sentence like this alerts people ahead of time that this kind of debate may be what comes if the state moves in some directions that we think they're moving in. It's equivalent to the question of, are the schools going to be expected to reduce their budget if funding is reduced? Because the only two other places to get the money, and that's from the police department or from raising taxes. And I don't think we want to do either.
When's my term up?
But just think if Chapter 70 doesn't get reduced and we have to bear the full brunt of the revenue reduction on the government side, guess who it is that's going to have to make a recommendation to get rid of those services?
Chris Martin, right?
Yeah. And then the finance committee has to submit that to town.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well, there may be some new bylaws by then, but we'll still have to stand up and be candid.
Hey, guys, I've got a hard stop at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
You know.
If you had a chance to read ahead about any comments, we'll let you go ahead and you may have any comments on any of the rest of it. Go ahead and give them, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, the next paragraphs all seemed good. The last paragraph, John, when I read it, you know, instead of that plan, the quote rainy day is making its appearance. I think, you know, we need to strengthen that statement because it's more than making its appearance. It's like the storm is upon us, rather. So if we could just maybe make that sentence stronger. The rest of it I thought read very well.
Okay. Then Rich, you can go ahead and duck out of the meeting at any time that you need to. It's fine. Thanks for the comments.
Yep. No problem. Okay. A couple more minutes. I'll hang in.
Okay. I've got a meeting set for tomorrow night.
Comments has two distinct meanings. As a noun, it means a verbal or written
Funny. That is funny. I've got a meeting set up for tomorrow night, and I would hope to have this finished or close to finished by then. I also asked Kathy to set up a meeting for us for Thursday night at 6:30 for a couple of reasons that we might not, in fact, be able to finish everything tomorrow night, including whether we have an adequate response or a conversation between Jeremy and Rich by then. So I've got another meeting set for Thursday night also. But we should be able to finish by then we technically, I think probably are okay till Monday, because the select board isn't gonna meet until Monday for the stabilization, for the warrant articles. So with that, let's go back to the document. Chris and Bob, if you go up to the second paragraph there about the buying time,
I didn't have any problem with them,
okay.
either one of them.
Either one of them, stabilization funds have a purpose?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, actually, what we're doing is we're using, in lieu of putting it into the stabilization fund, we're using it. And if it were in the stabilization fund, we'd probably be using it out of it. So,
yeah, yeah.
Instead of dipping it in and taking it out, we're just skipping going in.
Just
yeah,
skipping the
we're
middle. Yeah,
skipping a couple of votes.
yeah. And actually, it's, I left that out, but it's skipping the middleman is probably the
Right.
good analogy. And I'll try to strengthen, and the last paragraph is the very last thing I wrote, and I'd about had it by then. I'll see if I can strengthen that a little bit to emphasize the direness of the situation.
If you mentioned rainy day earlier, so if you left that and then say the rainy day is really more than that, it's really a big.
Yeah, that's what I think that's what Rich was getting at too. That instead of just saying a rainy day, over dramatize what the situation is. That's what you're saying, Scott, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess leave the term there because we referenced it earlier,
Yeah.
but use it to bridge off of or, build it to be something. This could be a big deal
Yeah,
for the town.
yeah. Rainy day is working its way into becoming a hurricane.
Rainy day, yeah. I mean, a rainy day is like, we get rainy days and they come and they go.
Okay, I'll try to strengthen that. Anybody have any suggestions for any other topics? I think we about covered the topics that we wanted to.
I mean, I've got a couple of questions back
Okay, yes,
earlier.
please.
Fourth paragraph, last sentence. Additionally, the minimum amount specified for school choice aid.
Back on page,
First page,
the first page, fourth paragraph, fourth,
paragraph of the report.
Here is a collection of items.
Huh?
How does the paragraph start?
Here's a collection of items is the way it starts. It's a lot,
Right.
my question is on the last
Okay.
sentence.
Additionally, there's a minimum amount specified in state statutes for school choice aid. I
Yeah.
think I thought it was the $5,000 that you discovered.
Yeah, but it's, the difficulty is that amount of money is the maximum amount. But the amount that you're gonna get is calculated. And I think everybody in the state now is their calculations bring it out at $5,000.
I thought we were getting 50.
I think it's the minimum amount. It sounds like, well, maybe it could be more than that. No, it can't be more than that. But it's gonna be that amount.
I thought we were getting more than that now.
No. Nope. The statute says the maximum is, it says it's, no, I don't know. They got some sort of a formula and it's 75% of something or other, or $5,000, whichever is greater.
Okay, hold on just a minute. Bob, school choice in the original governor's budget for this year was $697,715. It's not divisible by 5,000 evenly.
Oh, yeah, but you don't think this DESI does anything that's equal in just 0.0. They use fifths.
They use what? Excuse me, they use what?
They have fifth students. I think it's fifths. I don't think they go any lower than that. So in other words, if someone's there for 2 months of the year, they're a 1/5 student.
Oh, okay, all right, I see. So you count, you're counting basically not students, but student months.
Yeah, well, or full-time equivalency or whatever
Yeah.
whatever it's termed. So it's not, so you won't come out at exactly 5,000 no matter what you do. And I did read that every community in the state now receiving the maximum amount. In other words, the greater of the two, it's always $5,000 for everybody now.
Okay, so if I change that, say there's a maximum amount specified in state statutes for school choice aid. That then calls out for a comment that there's no guarantee that that in these economic times that won't be an easy place to cut money.
Got to change the law.
Excuse me?
They're going to have to change the law. That's not DESI, that's state law.
So that there's a
The formula is written into state law.
yeah, as a maximum.
Well,
Not
the whole formula is there.
Huh?
The whole formula is there.
The formula is, 3/4 of something up to a maximum of $5,000.
And that's all in the law. So DESI doesn't have the authority to change that. Only the legislature could change it. And I think I read someplace from a guy at one of the think tanks in Boston who used to have a responsible position at DESI, that the law is outdated and should have been changed a long time ago, but nobody seems to want to. And I suppose what occurs is that the people who have a net inflow of money on school choice would love to have it changed and have the number be higher. And all the school districts that have a net outflow of dollars don't want to change it because they lose more money.
Yeah, but
So-
I'm just thinking of the implications the other way, based upon conversations we had earlier, is that if that isn't changed and it's written into law, that means that money, of which is a big chunk for Granby, it will not be eligible for these state cuts.
That's correct.
Which makes it even worse. That means if the 20%, if that's completely out of bounds, and they're trying to get 20%, that means that the Chapter 70 money and the general government money is going to go down even further.
That's right. So that when you remember the chart you did, the two scenarios,
Yeah,
the second one, you assumed that it was going to be evenly cut, but if all of a sudden you're there, you got to pop another, well, round numbers, 20% of 700,000.
well, even more than that. Even more than that, the first go around at that assumes that is going to be cut by 20%, and that's in the town administrator's budget and in our budget.
Yeah.
And
So it's
yet,
100.
so that assumes that the legislature is going to be willing to change that, and they're not going to be willing to do anything. They're going to be kicking and screaming all the way on this budget.
Which is why I don't think there's much going to happen between the 15th of July and.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so many things that get involved. You know, when it's nice to say you want to protect education, but when they when they have such a high percentage of the budget, it amplifies everything on the rest of it. So, which is, I think, what on that telephone call that Chris was on, plan on 20%. They didn't want to say that it was going to be any place. They don't have the slightest idea.
Yeah.
And it's probably not practical to cut just one and not the other.
All right, well, I'm gonna have to change that sentence to read something like, additionally, there's a maximum amount specified in state statutes for school choice aid, and every town is now receiving that. Well, you know what? There is a maximum amount specified in state statutes. There is maybe a maximum minimum, maybe it isn't even important for this. Something that's specified in state statutes, that unless those statutes are changed, that amount of money will not be eligible for any cutting. And then the next sentence, that really be impossible for all those parameters to hold true.
Oh,
We
well.
would-
Your first sentence is perfectly correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, let me,
Unfortunately,
unfortunately. Let me think about changing that one too somehow.
okay. The other one I have is the one from last night.
Oh, about the,
School budget, no cuts in chapter 70 funds. Let me try this. What are you trying to get across?
what I'm trying to get across is that if, for Granby, if they actually want to cut Granby state aid by 20%, but they do not want to cut school aid, then the realities are those two things are impossible. Either the school aid has to be cut, or else they're going to have to send Granby a bill, much not give us money. They're going to have to send us a bill because there's not enough money there to cut 20% out of the budget. The total amount of general government aid is, you know, when you take out the school aid part of that, it's just in the hundreds of thousands. It's not anywhere near $1.3 million. So there's an inherent contradiction in what they said. They said they want to cut Granby, and everybody's, they want to cut Granby's budget from the state, Granby's income from the state by 20%, but they don't want to cut Chapter 70 money. And there is a law saying they can't cut choice money. And none of those things have they said anything, they haven't said anything about that to us, but those two things work against them being able to cut by 20%. Can't happen. Can't happen and make these parameters be true.
When you said, who was the last they?
Oh, the school part, Desi. I don't know anything that Desi has said about this. I was just based upon what I was told about what the conference with Senator Lesser, and I don't know who else was on there with him, if anybody was.
I think what bothers me about the sentence is you use the term the school's budget or proposed budget. And if you wanted to say the budget proposed for the school, in other words, the budget that's proposed, that is on the table right now, was not proposed, was not the way the school was proposing to do its budget.
Yeah, maybe I gotta change, maybe I have to change either all of the wording to make it clear what that section is, or maybe just something as easy as changing the schools, when I'm talking about what the schools were putting forward, make it the school's budget request as opposed to the school's budget.
Well,
That might work in these paragraphs. Let me think about that.
yeah.
But
Think about the other thing of just saying the budget proposed for the school. Because Chris is the one, really, he proposed the budget for them. He then tried to justify it on paper and didn't want to get involved in trying to make a determination, could net school spending be changed or not? So we probably took the easiest path and left it there as if it was. It didn't affect the bottom line because his intent was obviously to use enough reserves or free cash and reserves so that the pain would be as little as it is. But, you know, the school did present a budget and was ready to go to their public hearing with better than a $400,000 reduction, assuming that, I guess you'd say that the net school spending was going to be reduced. Though one never knows what their intent may have been in the way of amending motions at the town meeting. That's never was discussed.
Yeah, okay, let me, the idea is that we have to make sure that in anything we say, that where a distinction needs to be made between what the schools themselves had worked up for a budget, or what they requested for a budget, no matter where they got it from, versus the proposed budget in the town booklet is that there's a distinction between those two and what we say about them.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me work on some of that. Any other comments? I'm sorry, any other comments?
No, I'm done.
Scott?
I'm good.
Okay, well, all right, I know what I'm doing tomorrow. Okay, then if there's no other business, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. Thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Thanks for all the work you guys are doing.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.